What is up, YouTube? How is everybody doing? And welcome to the first commentary video of this new channel that I have made called Supreme Films. Well, my channel started off with a couple of edits here and there, but I decided to make some commentary on here just for the fun. Anyways, in this video, we are doing a tier list on all the live action Batman villains. I think a lot of these villains kind of vary from really good to could be better. Well, at the end of the day, this is all just personal opinion, and that's the whole point of these videos anyway. We will be doing villains from the solo Batman movies, so I'm talking about the Burtonverse, the Christopher Nolan movies, the Matt Reeves movie that just came out, and also the Joker. So the way I made this list is I ranked S tier as best of the best and I think are the most iconic villains in these movies. The A tier is just a list that are just as good, but not too iconic. B tier is what I think are underrated and could have been more, but they're still fine. C tier is I think aren't that important, not too evil, and the ones that are just, pushed to the side. And just nah are villains that I don't think were like that much of a villain anyway. So let's get started. First we have Gamble from The Dark Knight, played by Michael J. White, and I think his character really don't do too much in this movie. He is like that hard-headed douchebag mob boss that think he is so tough and knows everything. And he was very arrogant and somewhat intimidating, when it came to the Joker, but it all came back to him hard in the end. But honestly, he is not too important to the story though, but he is Joker head start into his arc in the movie, so I think I will put him in C tier. I think that's best where he is at. Next we have Bane from the movie Batman and Robin, and I think I can just put this one in D tier. He is nothing like the Bane we usually know. He got the muscles, but he's kind of like a henchman in this movie instead of his own character. You see, Bane has been known for how intelligent and tactical and cunning he really is, and one of Batman's most deadliest foes in his rogue gallery. But in this movie, he had the appearance, but just not the character and the smarts. He was basically just a goon. So I think D tier is where he was at. And it's not really the actor's fault anyway, they were just given bad material. Next up we have this guy right here, Barsad. That's what it said on the Wikipedia. So he's just a henchman and just loyal to Bane. He's basically just a general, a lieutenant, just follows orders. So honestly, maybe D tier or C tier, something around there. Next up, we have Catwoman from 2012, Night Rises, and I don't think she is outright evil like Joker or Bane, but she is not a good person either from the beginning of the movies, since she steals and sets up Batman to go against Bane by himself. I did enjoy this take on Catwoman. I think she is pretty underrated, and I liked her little redemption arc in the end of the film. She's just like all the other Catwomen, just not too evil, but they're not good either. So maybe she'll be the first B tier on this list. Next up, we have John Daggett from Dark Knight Rises. And I think I'll put this one in C tier. Just that generic douchebag Wayne Enterprises employee who's actually just a despicable, arrogant person who just want to take over the company. That's one of his main goals anyway. And he kind of works with Bane too. He ain't S tier evil, S tier villainy, but he ain't a good person, so I guess that counts. But hey, his original character from the animated series, Roland Daggett, is the reason that Clayface in that universe exists, so there's some points for him. And we can finally start our first A tier on this list is Arthur Fleck from the Joker. He is an interesting take on the character. He was a lonely, mentally ill man who had a laughing disorder that tried to be a good person and make people smile and laugh, but the society around him constantly tore him down to the point of insanity, who he eventually came in the end of the film. He is not comic level Joker of evil, of bad, and he only kills people that actually just really deserves it. He don't kill just to kill like the comic version does. His killings in the train is what caused the riots in Gotham, but at the end of the day, he was just a man that just wanted to be happy and was just fed up with being miserable and treated like garbage in every turn. But he is evil for some of the sins that he caused, so I guess A tier is what I'll put him. Next up, we have Joker from the Lego movie. Okay, for this one, I'm gonna be honest with you. I only seen the Lego Batman movie only one time, but I do remember it being like pretty good. The Joker is probably one of the best adaptation we have seen in my opinion in this movie. A really creative way for a Batman movie, especially a Batman movie that was targeted towards children. Joker just has so much personality in this movie, and I can see why so many love this adaptation of the Joker. I think for this Joker, I'd probably put him A tier next to Arthur. Even though he's not as serious as the other versions, but people still love this one. Next up, we have Lau from The Dark Knight, and I think I can put him C tier for me. Underrated. I mean, yeah, he helped the Gotham mob launder their money, and he was just a guy in disguise as a CEO of a big investment, but I don't have much to say about this one, but he was kind of a wuss for the Joker, so I think C tier is where he is at. Next up, we have Catwoman from Batman Returns from 1992, and I think I can put her B tier for me. It's been years since I've seen that movie, but I think her and Anne Hathaway's version can be together for this tier list alone. I think her design was pretty comic accurate, and the actress did great here in my opinion, Michelle Pfeiffer. I know this movie is a lot of kids' childhoods, but I still think it's good. Next up, we have Bane from Dark Knight Rises, and I think we can finally put our first S tier villain in my opinion. I know some people like to nitpick about this Bane, but I did enjoy Tom Hardy's take on it. I think he was pretty awesome in this movie. Yeah, it's not exactly comically accurate, but in this universe, everything is kind of realistic. So this version of Bane don't use the venom like he does in the comics and the games and the shows, etc. The performance alone kind of blew me away anyway. Now here's a little hot take. I'm sorry, but this movie isn't as bad as some Batman fans kind of think of it. I still think it's a pretty good movie and pretty good conclusion to the trilogy itself. And there's some nitpicks here and there, yeah. But man, the way Tom Hardy killed as Bane is just awesome, phenomenal, flawless. Next up, we have Mr. Freeze from Batman and Robin. I know not many people really like this movie, but at least Arnold Schwarzenegger's take on it was at least somewhat entertaining, since this movie was kind of meant for kids mostly. So maybe C tier? He's nothing like the comic version. The comic version is usually serious and takes his plan seriously, but this Mr. Freeze was pretty goofy. But in this universe, the villains in this movie are goofy anyway, so I guess it works for that movie, but it's not a good adaptation for the Batman Rogue Gallery anyway, especially for a serious character like Mr. Freeze. But Arnold Schwarzenegger is the GOAT, so. Okay, next up we have Joker from Batman 1989's Batman, and he's one of the OG cinema Jokers, and he was a lot of people's childhood Joker from the 90s. And I kind of like this take on Joker. Yeah, goofy like the rest of the villains in this universe, but I really think he kind of resembles a lot from the animated series version. and their designs look somewhat similar to each other. For its time, I think it's one of the best Joker people has got. And I think this Joker worked for that movie. To complete the Joker trilogy for the A tier, I probably put this one in A tier. Next up, we have Victor Zsasz from Batman Begins, and he is D tier to me. He was literally just a henchman, and according to the Wikipedia for Batman, he was just a regular Arkham Asylum patient that escaped and was never seen or mentioned again. And I guess he was just irrelevant to the trilogy. Next up, we have Poison Ivy from Batman and Robin. And next to Mr. Freeze, she's C tier. Like I said, in this universe, there's no serious villains, and a lot of them aren't as comic accurate. And they're all just so goofy. And this Poison Ivy was not a surprise. But Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy was kind of the best part of this movie. She gave it her all. Next up, we have Ra's al Ghul from Batman Begins 2005. And I think he is S tier villain for me. Like, come on. He was probably the best live action Ra's we have had, in my opinion. Even though this is technically the only cinematic version of Ra's al Ghul we ever had so far, I think, other than the show versions. This Ra's al Ghul really helped the trilogy kick off right. You know, set up Bruce's arc on his journey to becoming the Dark Knight that we all know. Of course, this version is pretty different from the comics since he don't use a Lazarus pit and not immortal. He's immortal spiritually, but not physically. But this character still worked for that movie, and I think he's S tier. I really like this one. Next up, we have Jim Carrey's Riddler from Batman Forever. He's alright. Batman Forever, a lot of people say it's an okay movie. Nothing like the comics Riddler, since this version was pretty cartoony. And some of these movies were kind of meant for kids anyway. Not that serious and arrogant that we all know. I still think the best Riddler we have had in media was in games, but in the Batman movie. But this Riddler was kind of, for this movie, Batman and Robin and Batman Forever was used for marketing, for Batman merch and toys. And they wanted those movies to be cartoonish for the kids as the series went on. So I probably put this Riddler for C tier. Next up, we have Sal Maroni from The Dark Knight. And I think he is C tier because he wasn't really a big villain in that movie anyway. He was kind of just an obstacle for the Joker. And Batman in that movie was one of the big bad mob bosses, and he was just pretty much like Falcone in Batman Begins, but just a slightly smaller role. Movie, so I think I can put him maybe top B tier. I don't think he is bad, like I don't think he's a horrible, but in Batman Begins I think he is amazing, pretty scary, but as the trilogy goes on he just becomes irrelevant and pretty much just forgotten. Last time we saw him he was just like this judge guy in Dark Knight Rises and then just never mentioned again, and then in The Dark Knight he was only played in like one scene and then just forgotten. But hey, Christopher Nolan needed the other villains to shine, I guess. But he was the only villain that showed up in the entire trilogy at once. Next, we have Max Schreck from Batman Returns. Honestly, I think I can put him B tier since he's kind of one of the main antagonists in Batman Returns and kind of helps the Penguin fuel his plans anyway. Honestly, this character is a pretty underground villain. He's never really appeared in anything else other than the Burton content, but you know, I guess he can be like bottom B tier. Next up, we have Talia al Ghul from Dark Knight Rises, and I think she is B tier. She is kind of one of the main villains in The Dark Knight Rises anyway. I don't have anything bad to say about this villain, since she was used as a twist in the very end. So she's kind of just one of the underrated ones, and basically just the detonator for the bombs anyway, for Gotham. So I think for her, in my opinion, I think she's just B tier. That big as much as Bane though, so I guess that's that. Next we have Heath Ledger's Joker, and for me he's the king of S tier of this list, obviously. He's one of the best parts in the whole trilogy. It was a huge, rootless, really dark and terrifying take in this character, which made a huge impact in this trilogy anyway. Like when people think of this trilogy, they think of Heath Ledger's performance. From beginning to end, Joker just stole the show and had a really dominating appearance. And he was a really compelling villain to watch. He always had a trick up his sleeve, so it was hard to just get a normal victory with this guy since there was always consequences, I guess. Probably one of the most scariest Jokers we have outside of the comics. So with his plans to push the people of Gotham, that just one bad day they could all just go just like him. Like look at Harvey Dent for example. And he even made Batman retire for a whole 8 years from his wrongdoings. So he was a pretty impactful villain. So when people think of the Dark Knight trilogy, they think of Heath's performance at this character. Rest in peace. Next we have this Russian dude from the Dark Knight, and he is D tier. He was kind of just a background mob guy and worked with Maroni. And his character is not talked about that often. He ain't a bad character, he just didn't really do that much. Wasn't that much of a threat anyway. So maybe I can just put him in D tier, right by the Bane henchman. Next we have Danny DeVito's Penguin. Okay, everybody loves Danny DeVito, and I remember actually quite liked this take on Penguin. Not comically accurate to the fullest, since he kind of looked like a penguin and acted like one, but it's a Burton movie, so it's kind of freaky anyway. But in the Burtonverse, a lot of things are weird anyway, I guess. So I guess it works for that character and works for that movie. So maybe like top B tier Penguin is that, for me, at least. Next we have Two-Face from Batman Forever, and he's kind of nothing like the comic counterpart. He's kind of goofy, and a lot of people say he's kind of acts like a Riddler or a Joker in this movie. He's not serious or himself, just like his comic version. I was never really into this take on Two-Face, so I think I can put him on C tier. Some of these old Batman movies were goofy for the kids anyway, like I said earlier. So a character like him will be impossible to be comic accurate. Next we have Carmine Falcone from 2005 Batman Begins again. And maybe he is B tier, since I thought he was a good first true antagonist for Batman in that movie. I like his lines, but man, his downfall was brutal, since the last time we saw him was getting tormented by Toxin, and one of the main motivations of Bruce wanting to bring justice to the city anyway. So with how he flooded Gotham with his wrongdoing, true motivation for Bruce anyway. Next we have Harvey Dent from The Dark Knight, and he is the king of A tier next to Arthur. I rewatched this movie around the beginning of the year, and I forgot how good this version of Two-Face was. So well written, and watching his transformation to insanity, all because of Joker, was such a ride to watch. But the thing is, I wanted to see a little bit more of him in the movie as Two-Face, but realistically, with burns like that, without taking any meds, since he was refusing them, he probably wasn't going to last anyway. But I still thought he was great. A tier for me. Next we have Carmine Falcone from the Batman movie. Now we're getting into the villains from the recent Batman film, The Batman. Falcone in The Batman is high B tier for me next to Scarecrow. I'm not going to try to spoil if some of you guys still haven't seen it, but it's August, so maybe some of you should seen it by now. But if you haven't anyway, maybe skip this part if you don't want to be spoiled. But anyways, I do love the little twist in the end, how Falcone was connected to the Wayne's family, which elevated the plot for me and gave more character motivation for that movie's Riddler version. His sins caused Riddler childhood to be so bad. But anyways, I think this version of Carmine worked a lot for this movie, especially the Catwoman subplot, and just connected everything all together in the end. And next we have Catwoman's version of the Batman, and she wasn't evil like the other villains in this movie. This version, just like in The Dark Knight Rises, she wasn't evil like the other villains in this movie, like the other version in The Dark Knight Rises, but I think she had a lot of character in this film, a lot more to do in this movie, so I guess that complete the whole Catwoman trilogy in B tier. And I love she goes back and forth with Bruce and either being a good or a bad or doing things only for herself to fulfill her own revenge against Falcone, of course. So I really like this take, and I think high B tier for her is best for her. Next we have Penguin from the 22 version of Batman. And I like this version of also Cobblepot. He reminded me a lot of the one from the Arkham games, which are some of the best games of all time. Whenever he was on screen, I just felt entertained. He kind of stole the show in those scenes. The Batman chase scene was just gold. And I think his appearance in this movie was so unrecognizable compared to the guy who plays him, who was Colin Farrell. Yeah, both these Penguins I think are A and B tier for me. Last but not least, we have our last S-tier villain is Paul Dano's Riddler from the Batman. This Riddler was more scary and intimidating than the Riddler we usually know. He's kind of like a serial killer type Riddler than the death trap treasure hunt Riddler that we saw in comics and games. I love this darker take, which makes me appreciate this character even more. Especially this version. That interrogation scene just shows how unhinged Enigma really is and just represents that he's just a psychotic man that thinks he is making a difference. Congrats! You made it to the end of the video. That's the entire tier list of Batman villains in cinema. If you have any thoughts or opinions of this list, or your own take of the characters, it don't matter. Leave it in the comments below and I may reply to some of them. The next video is another tier list video, so I hope you enjoyed. And if you want more of this content, like the video and subscribe. Thanks for watching and take care.